Alessia breathed heavily, gripping the white bed sheets beneath her. She couldn't take it anymore. She had reached her limit. Eric buried his face in the crook of her neck, his teeth pressing against her skin. Alessia let out a low moan. Lord Eric. Eric pressed her against the bed, his palms gripping her waist. Alessia tilted her head back, pushing against his broad shoulders. Please stop. She suddenly pushed him away, running barefoot on the floor, her long dress swaying in the air. Eric pinned her against the wooden door. It would be too impolite to go out like this. Alessia panted heavily. This is all your fault. It's almost dawn. Eric turned his cheek. One last time. Truly the last time. Alessia looked at him. Liar. That's what you said last time, and the time before that, and the time before that. I will never believe you again. Eric cupped the back of Alessia's head, his fingertips slipping into her pink hair, and lowered his head to kiss her lips. I know this man, who demands so much of me, is my husband, Eric Lansamos. 3 months ago, we were only husband and wife in name. Contract partners. It all started with a war. In the year 1374 of the new calendar, the king of the Orion Empire passed away from illness without naming an heir. A succession crisis erupted, and the court fell into chaos. The neighboring Elisa kingdom took advantage of the situation, intending to annex the empire's southern territories. The flames of war burned for 5 years. Eric Lansamos put an end to it all. As a Grand Duke, he was 23 that year. At dawn, commoners and nobles gathered on both sides of the streets, waiting for the hero's triumphant return. Eric rode on his warhorse, red flags fluttering in the wind. The hero who saved the country finally appeared, but in his arms, he carried a spoil of war. It was a symbol of disgrace. Alessia Kalenda, the third princess of the Elisa kingdom, and the most unwelcome spoil of war brought back by the hero. Kalenda stood in the magnificent court hall, her hands folded in front of her. A voice came from behind. The Viscount Sorrent family sends their regards to you, Grand Duchess. Alessia turned around abruptly. She bowed her head in greeting, haltingly spitting out official pleasantries. It is an honor to welcome you guests from afar. A burst of laughter erupted around her. The nobles whispered to each other. Her pronunciation is simply terrible. It's been 3 years, and she still can't speak the Empire's language properly. Can this level even be considered royal? They're just a bunch of barbarians. Alessia froze in place, her fingertips digging deeply into her palms. Eric stepped in and softly called her name. Alessia. Eric turned his head, his purple eyes sweeping across the room. The noise instantly died down. Your mother has arrived. She is waiting for you in the reception room. If you wish, you may leave this banquet early. Alessia responded softly. Yes. Eric turned his face. Is something wrong? Alessia lowered her eyes. Nothing. Eric withdrew his gaze. I understand. This was merely a political marriage in name, a false symbol of peace between the two countries. But I didn't know then that in just a few short hours, all of this would completely collapse. Sunlight filtered through the estate's shade, falling on the spires of the white stone mansion. The fountain rose and fell in the center of the courtyard. Alessia pushed open the heavy wooden door and walked briskly into the reception room. Mother. Sylvia set down her teacup and turned around. Oh, Alessia, you look not completely different. Truly a noble lady worthy of a name. Who would have thought you were once a daughter abandoned by her father? Alessia lowered her head, avoiding her gaze. Mother, I've had enough. Sylvia's gaze fell on Alessia's ears. Oh my, is this a gift from the Grand Duke? She reached out to touch Alessia's earring, her fingertips brushing across the green gem. How beautiful. This color really suits your skin tone. It seemed you're doing well. She scrutinized her daughter's face. How is your married life? Alessia turned her head away. Same as always. We haven't seen each other for so long, and this is all you care about? Sylvia took a step closer. Listen carefully. Is there still no news of pregnancy after 3 years of marriage? You must understand your current situation. If the Grand Duke takes a mistress and has a child, that everything you have will be completely ruined. Alessia clenched her fists. I can't do anything about it. He is always busy with military affairs. I only get to see him a few times a year. When he's not around, those servants always find ways to torment me. My skirt hems are slashed by sharp blades. My bed is soaked with cold water, and my plate is piled with rotten food. Alessia roared. I want to go home, Mother. I don't want to stay in this place anymore. Sylvia suddenly swung her hand. A crisp slap echoed in the room. Alessia's face was struck to the side. Sylvia looked down at her daughter, slumped on the floor. Where exactly do you want to go back to? Have you forgotten the kind of life you used to live? Do you, an illegitimate daughter, think you can just swagger back to your homeland and continue being a princess? She roared at her daughter, wake up, stop playing the tragic heroine and wasting time. What you should be thinking about is how to secure your position as the Grand Duchess. Mother was right. 3 years was enough time for me to start romanticizing the past. The life of an illegitimate daughter had been hell from the very beginning. After Elisa's defeat, Grand Duke Lansamos personally proposed a political marriage for the sake of peace. The first and second princesses were both legitimate and absolutely refused to accept such an humiliation. This task ultimately fell upon me. The lowly, illegitimate daughter was suddenly transformed into the Grand Duke's fiancée. Mother finally got to live the noblewoman's life she had always dreamed of. While I was locked in this magnificent birdcage, Sylvia picked up an incense burner. This is a gift from me. Don't forget, you have no home to go back to. Alessia opened the golden incense burner. Red powder flowed between her fingertips, emitting a cloying, sweet scent. She suddenly widened her eyes, her pupils trembling violently in the shadows. Eric walked through the ornately decorated corridor, his cape swaying with his movements. The attendant beside him reported in a low voice, "The itinerary for the trip to the Principality has been set. The surrounding countries have signed the treaty, but there are still stubborn remnants of the opposition. They are loyal to the old regime." The attendant handed over a stack of documents, his expression solemn. "The detailed information has been compiled. Please review it." Eric stopped in front of the tightly closed double doors. He turned his head to look at the servant holding a tray. What happened? The servant bowed slightly. "The madam's mother has already left, but the madam should still be in her room. No matter how much I knock, there is no response." Eric frowned slightly, his purple eyes flashing with a hint of doubt. He raised his voice. "Alessia, are you in there? Answer me." He gripped the metal doorknob and twisted it forcefully. The door wasn't locked. Eric pushed open the heavy wooden door, his gaze sweeping across the dim room. "Alessia, I'm coming in." Alessia was kneeling on the cold floor, her long pink hair disheveled over her shoulders. Her hands were pressing tightly against her chest, her fingertips digging into her skin. Alessia curled up on the red carpet. Her rapid panting echoed in the empty room. So hot, her body felt like it was burning. Lord Eric's voice came through. "Alessia, I'm coming in." Alessia looked up abruptly. "Wait." She lunged at the door, pressing herself tightly against the wooden panel. "Don't come in." Eric froze. "What are you doing in there?" Alessia pleaded softly through the door. "I'm sorry. Something came up. Please go to another room." Eric stood outside the door, his purple eyes narrowing slightly. "Your voice is trembling. What did your mother say to you?" Alessia's fingertips dug tightly into her shoulders, her breathing growing more rapid. Eric pressed his hand against the doorframe. "Are you sick?" Alessia closed her eyes, gritting her teeth to squeeze out a voice. "No." Eric lowered his head in thought. "Then she must have scolded you." Alessia shook her head violently, her forehead resting against the cold wooden door. "It's not like that. It's nothing." She let out a hoarse cry. "Please don't ask anymore." Eric raised his right hand, his palm resting flat against the door. From the end of the corridor, a noisy commotion arose. Several male guests looked confused. "What happened?" Eric's tone turned icy. "Open the door, Alessia, or I'll cut it down with my sword. I'll count to 3. Alessia looked up abruptly, her golden eyes shrinking violently. "Cut the door down? Is he serious?" Eric gripped his sword hilt, his thumb popping the crossguard open. Alessia trembled. "If he really did that, everyone would see me like this, in such a miserable state." The door slowly opened. Alessia's fingers gripped the edge of the door. "Only you are allowed to come in." Eric pushed open the gap in the door, his purple eyes suddenly contracting. Alessia was slumped on the floor, her long pink hair soaked with sweat. Her face was flushed, and her hands tightly clutched the collar of her dress. "Please, Your Grace." Eric turned his head to look at the butler behind him. "Take Charles and the guests elsewhere." He closed the door behind him with a backhand motion. The heavy wooden doors shut completely, isolating the noise outside. Eric walked toward the center of the room. A metal incense burner lay overturned on the carpet. Pink smoke swirled in the air. He bent down to pick up the spilled incense, falling into a long silence. Alessia hugged him, her fingertips clutching his black uniform tightly. "It's so hot. My body feels like it's burning up." Eric's fingers touched her cheek. Normally, this kind of chill always made me instinctively repulsed. But now, it was my only salvation. Why? I should be feeling cold. Alessia tilted her head back, gazing into those eyes that were so close. Why? His body is also burning hot like fire today. Eric's breathing grew heavy, sweat trailing down his cheek. Seduction incense. This was the method Mother used to survive in the red light district. By relying on this powder, she became the mistress of the Elisa King. And now, this powder had passed from her hands to mine. My consciousness began to blur. Alessia tilted her head back, her long pink hair falling over her shoulders. Every touch of skin felt like an electric current running through her body. Eric leaned down, his purple eyes flickering in the shadows. His words became difficult to understand. Eric gripped her shoulders and let out a low shout. "Wake up, Alessia." Alessia buried her hands in the crook of his neck, her fingertips clutching his collar tightly. Her rapid breaths puffed against his skin. Her body was completely out of control. She straddled him, her fingertips slipping into the gaps of his shirt, pulling hard to the sides. "These clothes are really in the way." Eric held her wrists down. "That's enough. Stop moving around." Alessia lowered her head and let out a muffled groan. Eric raised his hand, his purple eyes regaining their cold composure. He apologized in a low voice. "Forgive me for doing this when you are in pain." Alessia shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's not that. I can't undo the belt. This feeling is so terrible. Is it because of inhaling that powder?" All the grievances surged in her chest. Her heart felt like it was going to burst. "When was the last time I cried like this?" The insults echoed in her mind. "Filthy thing. You're just an illegitimate daughter. Shameless bastard." Her tears completely lost control. Alessia collapsed on the ground, letting her long hair hide her broken sobs. She walked deep into the palace. No matter how many tears she shed, no matter how hoarsely she screamed, her voice would only echo between the cold walls. Young Alessia hid behind the door, her hands tightly gripping the doorframe. "Mother." Sylvia stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her clothes without even turning her head. Alessia curled up in the shadows, using the back of her hand to wipe away the tears from the corners of her eyes. That coldness of being abandoned had always followed her like a shadow. Eric leaned down, his purple eyes filled with anxiety. "What happened?" Alessia gazed at the man in front of her. A thought emerged in her mind. "Perhaps, just for this moment, in front of this person, I could be a little selfish." Eric reached out to cup her cheek, his thumb wiping away the tears from the corners of her eyes. Alessia said, "Next time, please wear clothes that are easier to take off." Eric lowered his eyes and whispered softly, "All right." He asked softly, "When tomorrow comes, will you regret everything that happens tonight?" Alessia didn't answer. She kissed him fiercely. Outside the window, sunlight filtered through the checkered glass, spilling over the layers of white petals. Alessia lay on her side on the bed, her long pink hair spread across the pillow, her arms tightly hugging the quilt. She opened her eyes, her green pupils reflecting the morning light. This wasn't a dream. The images of last night exploded in her mind. Alessia sat up abruptly, her hands tightly covering her cheeks, a deep blush spreading across her face. "This is impossible. Absolutely impossible. What on earth did I do last night?" Eric, with his back to Alessia, spoke in a low and steady voice. "I know this marriage was not your intention. As long as you do not consent, I will never lay a finger on you. You only need to endure for 4 years. By then, you will regain your freedom." Alessia knelt on the bed, supporting her body with her hands. "We are clearly just a contract couple. If this continues, we'll become a real husband and wife. How should I face him now?" A soft sound came from outside the door, a rhythmic knocking on the wooden panel. Alessia looked up in panic. Martha pushed open the door and stood in the morning light. She asked softly, "Miss, are you awake? Are you feeling unwell?" Alessia suddenly straightened her back and waved her hands repeatedly. "I'm Fine. Who are you?" Martha bowed slightly. "I'm Martha." Alessia gazed at Martha's gentle face. "She looks like a good person. I've never seen you before." Martha stepped forward. "Today is my first day at work. I don't know why I was assigned to you. Does this displease you?" Alessia hurriedly shook her head in denial. "Not all. Compared to that cruel maid, she was 1,000 times better." Alessia tried to stand up, stepping barefoot onto the cold floor. Her ankles suddenly gave way, and her body lost balance, falling backward. "Martha cried out, miss." She reached out to support her shoulders. "Are you feeling unwell?" Alessia leaned against Martha's embrace, her voice weak. "I'm Fine. I just suddenly felt weak." She suddenly remembered the entanglements of last night, a deep blush spreading across her face. "Someone save me." Martha supported her as they walked down the corridor. Alessia gently pushed her hand away. "I'm all right. I used up too much energy last night. I need to eat something." She gazed at the sunlight outside the window. "I had planned to eat breakfast in my room, but now it's already lunchtime." She bit her lower lip hard, her eyes full of resentment. "This is all the fault of that man." The wooden dummy cracked under a heavy blow. Wood splinters flew into the air. Eric stood in the center of the courtyard, his short black hair soaked with sweat, his right hand tightly gripping a longsword. He raised his left hand, pressing his knuckles against his lips. His purple eyes trembled slightly, his breathing rapid from the intense exercise. Martha stopped in her tracks and covered her mouth, letting out a gasp. It's His Grace the Grand Duke. Alessia's long pink hair fluttered in the wind, a blush rising on her face. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. She couldn't look away. Alessia lowered her head, covering her mouth and nose. Her long pink hair hung on both sides of her cheeks. Calm down. We are husband and wife. It's normal for that kind of thing to happen. Calm down. Eric silently appeared at the corner, his short black hair slightly messy. He looked down at the young woman in front of him. What are you doing here? Alessia looked up abruptly and let out a scream. Her hands twisted together, her fingertips turning white from the force. She stammered in response. I was just passing by. She shouted loudly, sorry, and then turned around, running at full speed until she disappeared at the end of the corridor. Martha chased after her, reaching out to try and stop her. Miss. Eric stood where he was, his purple eyes watching her retreating figure. A gentle breeze blew his messy black hair. Only the rustling of leaves remained around him. The butler stood behind Eric, bowing as he asked, My lord, shall I have your meal sent to the study, as usual today? Eric turned his face, his short black hair covering his eyes. That won't be necessary. He raised a hand to cover half of his face, his fingertips pressing against his forehead. Today, I will be having lunch with Alessia. The maids shuttled back and forth carrying trays. Their skirts swept across the dining room floor, and the silver cutlery made soft clinking sounds. Alessia sat at one end of the long table. Her long pink hair hung down, hiding her gloomy expression. Why? Why did it turn out like this? At the two ends of the long table, one person sat at each. Eric and Alessia sat facing each other in a spacious dining room. Only the sound of their breathing echoed. He always used to use work as an excuse to avoid me. We had never even eaten a meal together. Why does it have to be today of all days? A pink-haired maid walked in carrying a tray and placed the food on the table. Her cold gaze stared at Alessia. Alessia froze, her green pupils contracting slightly. Thank you. The butler stepped forward. Madam, if you have any needs, please do not hesitate to command. Alessia let out a soft sigh. All right. Fine beads of sweat seeped from her forehead, and uneasiness showed in her eyes. The air almost solidified. This oppressive feeling was suffocating. The maids stood by the wall with their heads bowed, maintaining silence. They were best at reading the room. Eric put down his cutlery, his purple eyes looking across the table. Is it not to your taste? I can have the chef remake it. Alessia shook her head vigorously, her long pink hair swaying with emotion. Not at all. She forked some food and brought it to her mouth, replying softly, It's very delicious. She stared at the exquisite dishes on her plate. It was all food she had never seen before. This was the first time she was being treated like a true Grand Duchess. No matter how much they neglected me in the past, now that I am dining at the same table as the Honorable Grand Duke, those people will do everything they can to curry favor, selling my body for survival. In the end, I've walked the same path as my mother. Alessia stared down at her plate, a shadow casting over the upper half of her face. Eric stopped what he was doing, his purple eyes watching her. What's wrong? Alessia avoided his gaze, her voice tiny. I don't have much of an appetite. She buried her head deeply, her long hair hiding her face. I'm sorry. Eric looked at her in silence. He lowered his eyes, his messy black hair hiding his purple pupils, and asked in a low voice, Did I hurt you yesterday? The butler's hand shook, and the liquid in the teapot splashed out of the cup. The trays in the maid's hands nearly slipped. Everyone froze in place, not daring to make a sound. The dining room fell into a dead silence. Only the sunlight outside the window flowed quietly. Alessia stiffened her body, her green pupils instantly dilating. Her mind went completely blank. Alessia froze in her seat, her long pink hair falling over her chest. What is he saying? In 3 years of marriage, apart from official banquets, we have never had lunch together. The maids were already gossiping in private. Alessia stared down at her hands, her fingertips clutching her skirt tightly, bringing up this kind of topic in front of everyone. Is he doing it on purpose? Does he want to humiliate me in front of them? Eric leaned close to Alessia's ear, his short black hair brushing past her cheek. We are now a real husband and wife. Alessia suddenly hunched her shoulders, her hands covering her burning cheeks. Someone save me. Eric suddenly realized something. His purple eyes swept across the room, and he issued a brief command. Everyone, step down. The servants, bowed their heads, and left briskly, their skirts crossing at the doorway. The doors closed behind them, and the dining room fell into a dead silence. Eric watched Alessia. Now it's just the two of us. Eric watched Alessia. Now it's just the two of us. Alessia sat frozen in her seat, her hands tightly twisting together. It's too late. It's too late to apologize now. Eric looked down at the table, his hands clasped in front of him. About yesterday, I'm truly sorry. He lowered his eyes, his messy black hair hiding his expression. It all happened too suddenly. I couldn't control myself. He looked up and asked in a low voice, "Are you hurt?" Alessia shook her head repeatedly, her long pink hair swaying. With emotion, "I'm fine." She lowered her eyes, her fingers unconsciously playing with her hair. "That was an incense burner my mother gave me. I accidentally broke it. Mother is very worried that I still haven't been able to get pregnant." Eric remained silent for a moment, his purple eyes flickering slightly. "Do you want a child?" Alessia stood up abruptly, her hands pressing against the table. "Absolutely not. So, that was just an accident. Let's just pretend nothing ever happened." She turned and ran toward the door. "That's all I wanted to say." Eric called out loudly, "Wait, Alessia." He reached out and grabbed Alessia's wrist, suddenly pulling her back into his arms with force. His voice was muffled. "I hope you won't hate me because of this." Alessia froze in place, her green eyes looking up at him. She answered softly, "Okay." Eric let go of her hand, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. "Thank you." Alessia lifted her skirt, turned, and walked out the door. Then, "Excuse me." Eric stood where he was, watching the door slam shut with a heavy thud. Left alone in the empty room, he raised his hands and tightly covered his face. Rapid breaths seeped through his fingers as he tried to hide the blush on his face. The maids hid behind the drying bedsheets, lowering their voices to converse. The Grand Duke actually touched her just now. The red-haired maid suddenly yanked a white cloth off the clothesline. "If you have something to say it to her face. Don't mutter behind her back." The two maids hunched their shoulders and exchanged a glance. "You saw how the madam looked just now, didn't you? We'd better hold back a bit from now on." One of them lowered her voice, her gaze falling on the red-haired maid's back. "Especially you, Serena. The one who bullied her the most before was you." Serena stopped what she was doing, a cold gleam in her red eyes. She reached out and grabbed a pair of scissors, her fingertips slipping into the metal rings. "I will never back down." The bedsheet was cut to shreds, startling the two maids behind her into holding their breath. Serena gritted her teeth. "I will make everything perfectly clear. I will prove to everyone that that woman is nothing but a useless piece of trash." Alessia sat by the window, brushing her hair, her fingers tightly clutching her collar. She looked down at the red marks on her chest. The color was darker than yesterday. Fortunately, Martha was simple-minded. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to hide it at all. Martha approached the bed, carrying a tray, and bent down to examine the back of Alessia's neck. "Miss, were you bitten by bugs?" Alessia grabbed a powder puff and pressed it against her skin. "I must hide it before she gets closer. I absolutely cannot be discovered." The door suddenly opened. Alessia turned her head. "Martha, please wait a moment." She froze in place, her green eyes trembling slightly. Did she just come in without knocking? "Serena, why are you here?" Serena stood by the door, her hands folded in front of her. "Is there a problem with me being here?" Alessia gripped the edge of the blanket tightly, her voice trembling a bit. "I didn't mean that. Where did Martha go?" Serena walked up to the bed and reached out to smooth the messy bed sheets. "I am your exclusive personal maid, madam. Martha was just a temporary replacement while I was away. Now that I'm back, returning to my post is only natural." Alessia lowered her eyes. This maid is always so brazen, arranging a replacement without permission or notice, and now coming back as if nothing happened. There should be a limit to arrogance. Most of the bullying in the past came from her hands. Thinking of those days of deliberate harassment, she saw that I wouldn't resist, which was why she became increasingly worse. It's not that I haven't thought about asking Eric for help. It's just that some things are ultimately impossible to say. Her mother's voice echoed in her ears. "So what? What do you want me to do about it?" Alessia trembled. "I understand." Serena reached out to touch her cheek, a cold light shining in her red eyes. She walked behind Alessia and grabbed the edge of the dress. She began to adjust the clothes, pulling the laces forcefully. Her fingertips pressed against Alessia's back. Her movements were rough, and the fabric made a taut sound. Alessia bowed her head and endured it. Her long pink hair hung by the sides of her face, and her hands twisted tightly together. The corners of Serena's mouth curled up, looking down with cold eyes. She suddenly exerted force, pressing her fist against the small of Alessia's back and pulling the corset to its absolute limit. Alessia pitched forward, letting out a suffocated groan as she fell to the ground. "What are you doing?" Serena gave a cold sneer. "Just helping you put on your corset. In the Orion Empire, it is basic etiquette for a lady to wear a corset, going out hunched over like you would only disgrace the Grand Duke." She takes a step forward. "Perhaps you have nothing left to lose, but please do not smear the Grand Duke's reputation any further. You can't even speak the language here fluently. You can't even serve as a pretty ornament. Don't you feel any shame at all?" Whispers echo. How shameless. To think she can't even fit into this size. Even a village woman has a more solid figure than you. The Grand Duke will become the laughingstock of the capital. I really don't know why you're still staying here. These words pierced Alessia's heart like needles. Not being able to fit into the corset became the root of her pain, even leading to anorexia. Weight, figure, appearance. Her worth was completely hijacked by these numbers. Even eating felt like a crime. Why can't I lose weight? Until one day, Martha held up that brown corset. "Goodness, is this a corset?" Alessia lowered her head. "I heard that if women of the Empire don't wear this, they will be seen as a disgrace to their family." "Isn't that right?" Martha explained. "What old times are you talking about? It's true that extreme slimness was once popular in the Empire, and this torture device was born from that. But soon everyone realized that this thing harms the body. Ever since a lady fainted at a banquet, the Count's daughter, Xenia, started a boycott movement. Now, no one wears this kind of thing anymore. Where on earth did you get this?" Alessia froze, finally understanding completely that there was no so-called shame. "Serena used my inferiority complex to manipulate my mind, pushing me into the abyss of self-loathing." Alessia slowly spoke. "Serena." Serena turned her head. "What is it? Is there a problem?" Alessia clenched her fists, her nails digging deep in her palms. "You are fired." Serena pointed at Alessia's nose, her red pupils distorted with anger. "How dare you boss me around? Who do you think you are?" Alessia straightened her back. "I'm the legal wife of Grand Duke Lancimos. I'm the mistress of this house. And above all, I am your employer." She took a step closer. "You left your post without permission, and you neglected your duties regarding my diet and daily life." She pointed to the torture device on her waist. "And this corset. You have no way to deny these charges. Now get out of here." Serena staggered back half a step, letting out a low growl through gritted teeth. "Even so, this isn't something you could decide on your own. Since when did you have such authority? A major matter like this requires the Grand Duke's nod." Alessia let out a cold laugh. "You think I don't have the authority? Very well, in that case, let's go see the Grand Duke. Do you think he'll stand by my side, or do you think he'll praise a loyal servant like you?" Serena froze in place, fine beads of sweat seeping from her forehead. The maids were busy in the kitchen. Sunlight pierced through the window, scattering on the wooden table piled with utensils. Serena strode through the corridor, her leather shoes making a dull thud on the floor. She violently pushed open the door, glaring fiercely at Martha. "Congratulations. From now on, you're the Grand Duchess's personal maid." Martha was stunned. "But..." Serena pointed at Martha. "Hurry up and go." Martha ran towards the end of the corridor. Yes. The maids in the kitchen gathered together. "What on earth happened? I thought that woman would never fight back." Serena gritted her teeth. "How should I know? Maybe she took some weird medicine." She waved her hand, sweeping the plates off the table. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the room. "That damn woman." Alessia suddenly lunged forward, her arms tightly wrapping around Martha. "Martha, I missed you so much." Martha was knocked back, staggering, her hands freezing in midair. "I'm very happy to officially become your personal maid, but what happened with Serena?" Alessia released her embrace. "It's a long story. Maybe she was scared by my sudden change in attitude, or maybe she felt guilty. Anyway, Serena finally gave in. Thankfully, she backed down on the spot. If we really had to confront each other in front of Eric, I might have completely frozen up from nervousness. But for some reason, this feeling is incredibly satisfying." Alessia took Martha's hand. "Martha, have the maids been gossiping about me lately?" Martha stood behind Alessia. "I'm not too sure, but I heard that the Grand Duke's affection for you exceeded expectations. Some even said they should probably tone it down a bit, but I don't really understand what that means." Alessia lowered her eyes. "I see." She looked at herself in the mirror and bit her lip. "Silently enduring will never change the current situation. I don't care if they call me vulgar. I will use everything I can to the very end." Alessia turned her head. Martha stopped her movements. Looking at her, Alessia said, "Help me change my clothes." Eric stood in his study, his short black hair covering his eyebrows. He took the tray handed by the attendant, his fingertips tracing the cold metal edge. The butler knocked on the heavy wooden door. "Your Grace, you have a visitor looking for you." Eric's tone was cold. "I'm very busy today." The butler hesitated for a moment, lowering his voice. "The visitor is Madam." Eric pushed open the door, his purple eyes looking forward. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Alessia looked up, her green eyes sparkling. "I heard you worked late into the night yesterday, so I prepared some tea to refresh you and relieve your fatigue. May I come in?" Eric stepped aside, clearing the doorway. "Of course." The butler softly reminded him, "Your Grace, your tie is crooked." Eric hurriedly reached up to adjust his tie. The two sat across from each other. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, scattering over the white coffee table. Eric stared at Alessia's attire, his purple eyes trembling slightly. "I didn't know you wore this style as well." Alessia picked up her teacup. "I just wanted to change a mood. After all, I just freed myself from the constraints of corsets and crinolines." She put down the cup, her fingers grazing the ceramic edge. "I came here today because I have a matter to report to you." Eric leaned back. "What is it?" Alessia looked down at the tea. "I took the liberty of dismissing my previous personal maid and replaced her with a girl named Martha. I've already confirmed with Mrs. Jill that the personnel change itself doesn't violate any rules, but I apologize for only explaining this to you after the fact." Eric remained expressionless. "For such trivial matters, you can handle them as you wish." Alessia suddenly leaned forward, her golden eyes trembling. "Really?" Eric stood up, looking down at Alessia. "You're my wife. You have the right to decide on all matters within this estate. There is no need to seek my permission." Alessia froze in place. She slowly lowered her head, shadows covering her eyes. "Actually, besides this, I have one more request." Her mother's voice echoed in Alessia's mind. "Wake up. Stop playing the tragic heroine and wasting time. You should be thinking about how to consolidate your position as the Grand Duchess." Alessia lowered her eyes. "Mother is right. To prevent a second Serena from appearing, I must win my husband's favor. I've mentally prepared myself for this, and even put a lot of effort into my appearance. However," Alessia rested both hands on the table. "Please change my official language tutor." Eric, holding his teacup, shifted his purple eyes slightly to look at Alessia across from him. Alessia covered her cheeks with both hands, a blush showing through her fingers. "What on earth am I saying?" To blurt out something completely unrelated. Eric put down his teacup with a soft clink. "Since that is the case," his fingertips rested against his jaw. "There aren't many tutors fluent in both languages. Finding a replacement won't be an easy task." Alessia looked down at her knees, her fingers gripping tightly. "I see. I apologize for making such an unreasonable request." Eric lifted his eyes, his purple pupils locking onto her. "It's not entirely impossible, though." Alessia suddenly looked up, her green eyes widening. "Really?" Eric nodded slightly. "Just leave it to me." Alessia picked up her teacup to hide her face, using the act of drinking tea to avoid his gaze. Thank goodness he didn't press for a reason. Madame Michelle, like the others, looked down on people from Elisa. Her so-called lessons were nothing but self-study. "I couldn't master this language at all." Alessia walked towards the tutor with a book, her fingertips trembling slightly. "Excuse me, I forgot this word." Madame Michelle slammed her teacup down, the porcelain hitting the table. "Aren't there phonetic symbols in the dictionary? If you don't even know something this simple, what gives you the right to call yourself a princess?" Alessia clenched her fists. "But looking at it from another angle, maybe this is a good thing. As long as I learn the official language well, with a new teacher, no one will be able to mock my pronunciation anymore. Maybe I can even make some friends." Eric approached from behind, leaning over to encircle Alessia. "Here." Alessia took the blue book handed to her. "Thank you very much." She suddenly froze, stiffening in her chair. "This distance is way too close." Eric noticed her unusual reaction and turned his face. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Alessia's cheeks flushed crimson, her green eyes wavering violently. "Could the new teacher be you? Is this what you meant by 'leave it to me'?" Eric lowered his eyes slightly, his fingertips tracing the paper. "Try reading it aloud first." Alessia held up the book, covering half her face and only revealing her eyes. Her heartbeat almost drowned out her breathing. She replied in a low voice, "Yes." Eric leaned close to her ear. "More than perfect pronunciation, accurately conveying your intent is what matters. There's no need to be nervous." Alessia tightly shut her eyes, a blush spreading across her cheeks. His face is too close. I can even feel his breath. She clenched her hands tightly. Calm down. This is the perfect opportunity. You've already made up your mind, haven't you? Even if it feels shameful, this is the only way to break the status quo. I must borrow his strength. If I don't want to return to a life of being trampled upon, I must win him over no matter what, at all costs. This is a gamble for survival. Alessia stared at Eric, who was close at hand. I was supposed to be the one seducing him. Why am I the one being drawn to him instead? Alessia lowered her eyes, a blush on her cheeks. I must be subtle. I have to maintain my subtlety. Eric noticed her silence and slightly turned his head. Alessia, are you listening? Alessia placed her hand over Eric's hand. Eric's heartbeat had completely spiraled out of control. Alessia let out that soft gasp. Alessia's fingertips touched Eric. Beneath her touch, his muscles tensed. His breath fell upon her ear, and his heartbeat pounded against her back. Eric lowered his eyelids, his profile hidden in the shadows without any expression. Alessia turned her head to observe him. She originally thought her seduction had worked, yet his face was completely blank. Was it just my illusion? Eric looked down, staring ahead, his purple eyes completely tranquil. Perhaps he is already used to such scenes, navigating through countless emotions with ease. He really is a dangerous man. Alessia lowered her eyes. No wonder he is so calm and experienced. Eric looked down at her. What's wrong? Alessia snapped back to reality. Nothing. I was just thinking about something. Please continue. Eric turned the pages, his gaze falling on the paper. The basic part is over. The pronunciation of the official language and the Elisa language are slightly different. Let's practice a bit more. Alessia responded softly. All right. She held the book. Eric explained things even more clearly than the teacher. As long as I do well, he praises me. Even if I make a mistake, he patiently corrects me. I originally thought he was a cold and terrifying person. It seems you can't judge someone just by their appearance. Not judge others. Eric reached out and passed the teapot. Let's take a break. It's a good time to taste the tea you prepared. Alessia replied in a low voice. All right. The red tea was poured into the cups. Eric picked up his teacup. Alessia sat to the side, observing his reaction. Don't push it too hard, Alessia. You are gradually closing the distance. Eric suddenly coughed violently, his body leaning forward uncontrollably. Alessia let out a startled cry, reaching out to support his shoulder. Are you all right? Eric covered his mouth and nose, questioning in a low voice. What did you put in the tea? Alessia froze in place, her pupils suddenly contracting. What? She looked at the teapot on the table, her trembling fingers reaching for the lid. She lifted the ceramic lid. Impossible. Eric suddenly stood up, his 5 fingers tightly gripping Alessia's arm. What exactly are you trying to do? This is definitely no accident. Alessia raised her face, her breathing becoming rapid under the pressure. Wait, this is a misunderstanding. She thought to herself, I admit I wanted to attract Eric's attention, but I would never go this far. Eric leaned in close, his purple eyes radiating a chilling glint. Why did you do this? What is your goal? Is it really just to change your tutor and maid? Alessia lowered her eyes. Isn't it only natural for a wife to want to please her husband? She suddenly shook off Eric's hand. Eric leaned in, his thumb heavily pressing against Alessia's lower lip. If that's the case, you must be prepared to bear the consequences, aren't you? Alessia froze in place, her green eyes trembling with shock. Alessia held up the incense burner with both hands. I had planned to do this from the very beginning. Martha quickly followed behind, her gaze locked on the incense burner. Madam, what do you plan to do with it? Is it a gift for the Grand Duke? Alessia turned her head. It's nothing, just a cheap little trinket to please my husband. It can indeed win favor, but that is not the ultimate goal. Why do I always waver at the crucial moment? Perhaps what I'm truly looking for is. Eric leaned in, his fingertips brushing Alessia's nape. Not for the touch of his fingertips, even if it's just by chance. Alessia raised her face, her green eyes reflecting his silhouette, feeling the heat radiating from his skin. Not for the awakening of my senses. Eric held Alessia's face with both hands, their foreheads resting against each other, their breaths intertwining intimately. The moments they once shared revived with every breath. Alessia closed her eyes. She thought it would be as calm as flowing water, but she was completely swallowed by this force. Eric suddenly exerted force, pulling Alessia into his embrace. His fingers tangled in her pink hair, tightly gripping the back of her head. This wasn't the tenderness she had anticipated, but a demanding desire bordering on destruction. Alessia's fingertips tightly gripped his collar. Stop, I can hardly breathe. Eric pulled back slightly, his collar coming undone from the tugging. Alessia let out a gasp as her body was suddenly lifted by Eric. Eric cradled Alessia's face, their lips meeting again, swallowing all her broken moans. Alessia shut her eyes tightly, enduring the almost brutal plunder. This feeling was completely different from his previous gentleness. It was like he was a completely different person. She lifted her flushed face, her green eyes losing focus in dizziness. Why does he look like he's angry? Eric gripped Alessia's hand. Why are you resisting? Isn't this what you've always wanted? Alessia froze. I was just doing what my mother told me to do. I didn't do anything wrong. Two maids stopped at the end of the corridor, lowering their heads to avoid the leather shoes passing by. The butler walked across the red carpet towards the closed door. He stood outside, looking down at the pocket watch in his hand. The metal casing flipped between his fingers. The time had come. He raised his right hand, his knuckles knocking heavily on the wooden door, producing a dull sound. Your Grace, is now a convenient time? Eric's movements halted, turning his head toward the door. Alessia widened her eyes, her green pupils contracting in tremors. Someone's here. You should at least respond. The butler stood outside, looking down at his pocket watch. Is Madam inside? Did something happen? Is your Grace still inside? Alessia responded to the inquiry outside the door. Yes. I will wake him up. Please wait a moment. Eric leaned close to her ear, his voice deep and icy. If it were another man outside the door, would you welcome him like this too? Alessia suddenly threw her head back, letting out a piercing scream. The butler looked at the door with a surprised expression. Madam? Eric spoke up to respond. She is fine. Please tell Morito I will be right there. Alessia suddenly turned her head, questioning him. What on earth are you thinking? Eric turned his face away. Don't get twisted. You were the one who drugged me first. He leaned over, lowering his center of gravity. This means that deep down, you desire for all of this to happen. I've been holding back all along. He pinched Alessia's chin, his fingertips leaving red marks on her skin. Right at this very moment, my body is still screaming to pin you down, tear your clothes, and possess you just like that night. I desire you. I desire you like crazy. Yet you keep approaching me, seducing me, completely ignoring how much effort I put into restraining myself. Alessia, I am not the saint you imagine me to be. So, stop provoking me excessively. Alessia violently pushed him away. She turned and walked towards the door. I don't even remember how I escaped from him. My heart was consumed by fear and confusion. Everything had completely spiraled out of control. Alessia held up her skirt and ran down the corridor, her mind filled only with Eric's pained expression. That afternoon, Eric led the army away from the territory, his return date uncertain. Alessia stood by the window, watching the departing cavalcade disappear beyond the iron gates. I should have been used to this kind of parting. This is just how this life is. Butler Evan remained in the territory. As the Grand Duke's trusted confidant, he was enough to intimidate those maids harboring malicious intentions, making them afraid to act rashly. Evan bowed slightly. Madam, His Grace entrusted me to give this to you. Alessia turned around, gazing at the black wooden box handed by Evan. That was the Grand Duke's parting instruction. Alessia opened the lid. A silver key lay on the red velvet, its metal edges reflecting a cold, sharp light. This was a transfer of power and also a heavy shackle. It had been a full 2 months since parting with Eric. This long absence was nothing unusual. It would be rare if he returned early. Once again, I'm left alone in the mansion. Elisha said a disk. The only difference is I am no longer idle now. Martha walked in carrying a tray, gazing at the stacks of ledgers on the desk. Are you working again? You barely closed your eyes last night. If this continues, your body will break down. Alessia, Dot put down her quill and looked up with a smile. I'm Euphine. This is a very important task that I must handle properly myself. Eric handed over the key. This was not only a symbol of the mistress of the house, but it also represented the authority to manage 20 estates. After I learned the official language here, he finally entrusted this responsibility to me. His stern expression must have been due to extreme fatigue. I still feel that I don't deserve the title of Grand Duchess. Even now, I'm still not sure if I belong here. When I was exiled to live at my cousin's house, I studied the basics of commerce. I am not completely without experience. I must prove myself. I cannot betray this trust. Martha, Dot placed the white porcelain teacup on the desk, softly reminding her, please have some tea first. Alessia nodded, thank you. Alessia caught a whiff of an unusual scent, her pupils suddenly constricting. Martha, you didn't add anything strange in here, did you? Martha tilted her head and smiled. Do you mean your favorite fragrance? Or your favorite blend ratio? To keep your mind at peace, I specially added in every time. Alessia leaned her hands on the desk, her body stiff with shock. There's no need to add it anymore. So all this time, I brought it upon myself. A crisp knock came from outside the door. A maid pushed the door open. "Excuse me, madam." Beside her stood a tailor. "His Grace ordered me to take your measurements, so I brought a tailor." Alessia looked at the fabrics piling up in the room and subconsciously took a step back. "I think I already have enough clothes." The tailor suddenly rushed in front of Alessia. "What are you talking about? Every season requires different clothes, from everyday wear to formal gowns to the latest styles." He pulled out his measuring tape, wrapping it around Alessia's waist. "You should fully enjoy fashion while you're young. Wearing fitting clothes will also improve your mood." Alessia let the maid untie her old clothes and change into a light undergarment. "I used to only wear ready-made clothes. Why the sudden need for custom tailoring?" The maid stopped what she was doing and looked into Alessia's eyes. "Did you really not know? Because Madam dislikes social events, His Grace has been personally picking out your clothes by himself for the past 3 years." The tailor paused his pen. "A while ago, His Grace suddenly said that the measurements aren't quite right." Eric stood in the middle of the tailor's shop, gesturing with his hands in front of his chest, a blush spreading across his face. The tailor waved the measuring tape in his hand. "I've never seen a husband so attentive to his wife. Your relationship, that must be very good." Alessia lowered her head, avoiding the tailor's gaze. "I don't think we are close. In the eyes of others, this relationship might not seem bad, but in reality, we are more like strangers living under the same roof. Even so, there are moments when we truly connected. Perhaps that argument merely brought us back to where we started." Alessia lay on a large bed, curling up on her side under the moonlight. "The only difference, that is my feelings for him." Alessia curled up in the middle of the spacious bed, her fingertips tightly gripping the silk sheets. "Ever since separating from Eric, every night has become unusually unbearable. A strange sensation spreads within my body. My body seems to no longer be under my control. Once you know the taste of desire, loneliness becomes an unbearable torture. Once awakened from a dream, I can't fall back asleep. I can only keep my eyes open in the dark, waiting for dawn to break." Sunlight pierced through the curtains. Alessia suddenly sat up, her hands tightly gripping the bed sheets, breathing heavily. She sat alone on the edge of the bed. What kind of dream was that just now? Alessia sat at the desk, supporting her forehead with one hand, her hair falling over the stacked books. "I am truly a sinful woman." Martha stopped watering the flowers and turned to look at Alessia. "Did you say something just now?" Alessia avoided Martha's gaze. "It's nothing. Please forget it." Martha walked in carrying a tray. "Please get some proper rest, otherwise His Grace will blame me." Alessia leaned back in her chair. "You're right. I'm sorry." She stopped her pen. "Martha, have you heard any news of Lord Eric returning to the city?" Martha showed a surprised expression. "His Grace, that didn't inform you?" "The butler mentioned that the border has stabilized, and this is just a routine inspection. He should be back soon." Alessia suddenly looked up. "Really?" Martha held the tray, thinking it depends on the specific situation. "During the spring patrol, we need to provide security for Adil and Cavalia. The Lansimo's territory is right in the center of these places. He could have come back once every 3 months. However, in the past 3 years after the patrols ended, His Grace never returned to the mansion. It is said that he is currently at the Silver Coin Rest just 10 kilometers away. So, he probably won't be coming back this time either." Alessia lowered her eyes, her fingertips resting weakly against the desk. "So that's how it is. This is the reason why he rarely came home for the past 3 years." Martha hurriedly waved her hands. "Of course, this has nothing to do with you, madam. There must be some other reason." Alessia pondered deeply. "I always thought he wasn't home because the Emperor had high expectations of him. I was so deeply entangled in this marriage that I never suspected anything. He always silently turned and left. It turns out he was just hiding from me." Alessia suddenly grabbed her head. "I didn't realize it all this time. How utterly foolish." Martha shrank her shoulders in fright, the tray in her hand making a crisp clinking sound. Alessia took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "It doesn't matter. Right now, I just need to fulfill my duties as a Grand Duchess." She opened the heavy ledger, her gaze falling on one of the records regarding the herbal trade. Martha leaned in to take a look. "That was proposed by Viscount Owen to His Grace at a ball a few months ago. But for some reason, this plan seems to have been put on hold." "Why would it be put on hold?" Alessia closed the ledger and looked up at Martha. "Investigate this matter immediately and arrange a meeting with the Viscount for tomorrow." She rested her forehead on one hand. Even though she didn't want to care, Eric's face kept appearing in her mind. Am I just feeling frustrated? However, not long after, her thoughts were completely cut off. Alessia kept her head down, her hands folded in front of her, exuding a gloomy aura. Peelden took off his bowler hat, pressing it against his chest. Viscount Owen bowed slightly. "Good day, Grand Duchess." Alessia sat on the bench. They were late by a full hour, yet they didn't offer a single word of apology. Viscount Owen crossed his legs and sat down, leaning back against the sofa. "Shall we get down to business, then?" He spread open the documents in his hands, looking directly at Alessia across from him. "I believe you have already read these materials." Alessia picked up the papers, her fingertips tracing the dense handwriting. "This is a proposal regarding the export of herbs, right?" Viscount Owen leaned forward. His fingers tapped lightly on his knees. "Putting aside those minor details, I would first like to discuss the clause regarding the change of land use, converting wheat fields into herb plantations." Alessia tightened her grip on the documents in her hands. "Converting 1/3 of the arable land to plant herbs. The territory's food supply will be drastically reduced. The herb yield in the first year will also be only half. How do you plan to guarantee the commoners' rations?" Peelden let out a muffled laugh. "You don't need to worry about that. We have already consulted the Principality of Pem and reached an agreement to import wheat." Alessia turned her head. "If the territory's self-cultivated land decreases, the people's livelihood will be subject to others. What if there's friction with the Principality of Pem in the future and they cut off the food supply?" Viscount Owen abruptly waved his hand, sweeping the papers off the table. "Madam, please allow me to speak frankly. This plan is the result of research by top experts." He looked down at Alessia, his eyes full of disdain. "What could a woman like you, who only knows how to talk emptily at home, possibly understand?" Alessia looked straight at him. "I'm merely thinking from the perspective of the commoners. This proposal is too poorly considered." Viscount Owen raised an eyebrow. "A plague is spreading across various countries. Exporting herbs is a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity. This will also be of great benefit to the people. Or is it that you do not wish to see the commoners make money?" Alessia clasped her hands tightly, remaining silent. Peelden smiled and smoothed things over. All right. The Grand Duchess has only just taken over the estate, after all. It is only natural that there are some things she doesn't understand. The commercial value of herbs is far beyond that of ordinary food. The farmers will be very happy to make the switch. As for a food crisis, I think you are overthinking it. Our relationship with the Principality of Pem is solid. I often drink with their ministers. Those people are trustworthy and kind, unlike those Elysian people who love to betray others. Alessia looked down, staring at the ground. "Elisa? That is my homeland." Peelden leaned back in his chair. "This plan is led by Viscount Owen's eldest son. He is young, but extremely talented. I have high hopes for him." Viscount Owen let out a burst of laughter. "Indeed, he is much more outstanding than I was at his age." Peelden stood up, looking down at Alessia on the sofa. "I believe you now understand the benefits of this plan. Since that is the case, please sign the document." Alessia looked up, her lips trembling slightly. "But..." Peelden suddenly leaned in close, his broad figure completely overshadowing Alessia. "It doesn't matter. Just leave everything to us." Alessia froze in place, tightly clutching the stack of documents in her hands. The figures around her pressed down like high walls. "You think too much, Alessia. You just need to be obedient. You just need to obey." A fountain pen was handed to her. Alessia reached out and took it, her fingertips touching the cold barrel of the pen. She lowered her eyes. The tip of the pen pressed against the paper, making a faint scratching sound. Viscount Owen picked up his teacup and exchanged a glance with Peelden beside him. Both of them had smiles on their lips. The pen tip came to an abrupt halt on the paper. Alessia's hand, holding the pen, began to tremble. "I can't do it." She raised her head and looked straight at the two men in front of her. "I cannot sign this document." The teacup in Viscount Owen's hand tipped over. "What did you say?" He stood up abruptly, pointing at Alessia and roaring loudly. "After explaining so much, do you still not understand?" Alessia gripped her skirt tightly with both hands. "This is not within my authority to decide on my own." She raised her head, her gaze locked on Viscount Owen's face. "Until the Grand Duke returns, I will not agree to any proposals." The door was slammed shut heavily, causing a violent vibration. Viscount Owen strode through the corridor, waving his arms to vent his anger. How dare she be so insolent? To be played for a fool by such an ignorant woman is an absolute disgrace. Peelden roared. What kind of tricks did she use to make the Grand Duke listen to her every word? Martha pushed the door open and walked into the quiet room. "Madam, Alessia sat alone on the large sofa, her back straight. She replied softly, "I'm fine." She looked out the window at the light filtering through the glass. If he were here, at least I could discuss it with him. Alessia lowered her eyes, her fingertips lightly touching her flushed cheeks. Lord Eric, once he returns, there will surely be a way. A few days later, Evan abruptly pushed open the main doors and stumbled into the hall. "Madam, something terrible has happened. The farm village is on fire." The tray in Martha's hands shook violently. She covered her mouth and let out a gasp. Evan reported, "With the continuous fires over the past few days, it is impossible for them to have started naturally. This is not a natural disaster." Alessia guessed, "Could it be Viscount Owen taking revenge because I refused to sign a contract?" Evan walked briskly down the corridor. "I never thought he would go this far. I heard he owes a massive debt from gambling, and his whole family is trying to use the herb business to pay it off. By burning the crops, he can sacrifice the commoner's interests to force you into an agreement." Alessia gazed into the distance. His goal doesn't end there. The incident happened right after Eric handed over the management rights. He wants to destroy my credibility and use this to expand his own power. Alessia stood at the edge of the high platform, overlooking the gathered citizens below. Evan spoke up. "The residents of the Lansamos territory are currently suffering from the aftermath of the fire. Compensation must be given according to custom." He leaned close to Alessia's ear. "Viscount Owen has deep ties with the family. Do not make any public statements based on speculation. Not rash statements." Alessia looked at the victims. "I am deeply sorry that this has happened, but I will absolutely not abandon a single person." A young man waved his arm. "We don't need sympathy. What we want now is an explanation." He gestured to the back. "Bring her here." An old woman walked forward, her head wrapped in white bandages. The seeping blood stained the fabric red. The man said, "This is my mother." Alessia held her breath, her right hand tightly covering her lips, her pupils trembling. The young man lowered his head and recounted, "It was late at night. Everyone was sound asleep. We were awakened by a scream. Outside the window, the flames shot into the sky, and the entire farm was engulfed in a sea of fire. My mother rushed into the fire to save the crops. The flames swallowed her in an instant." The young man clenched his jaw. "When we found her, she was already like this. Although her life was saved, the pain will accompany her for the rest of her life." "Grand Duchess, what is the truth behind this fire? We will absolutely not accept such an unjustified injustice." Alessia lowered her head in silence, shadows covering her face. Her right hand tightly gripped her skirt, her knuckles turning white from the force. She turned her head. She instructed Evan behind her, "Prepare a carriage." Evan looked astonished. "Are we leaving right now?" Alessia's gaze was firm. "That's right. I'm going to see Eric Lansamos." Eric sat by the window, his fingertips playing with a pocket watch. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, shining on his shoulders. A blonde-haired man said, "The peace negotiations have ended. Are you planning to go home?" Alessia's face appeared in Eric's mind. "She probably doesn't want to see me." The blonde man leaned close to the mirror. "Did you fight again?" "I never thought the invincible Grand Duke would turn into a henpecked husband after marriage. I told you not to get married back then. Do you regret it now?" Eric remained expressionless. Someone who has never been in love wouldn't understand. The blonde man stomped his feet in anger. "Since that's the case, I'll visit your estate some other day to ask for the secret to a happy marriage." Eric stood up and walked towards the corridor. "I still need to inspect the territory. You also have official duties to attend to." The blonde man followed closely behind. "Just leave those things to the ministers. I hate dealing with official documents the most. Are you afraid I'll see your real family life?" The guards crossed their spears, blocking the entrance. "Miss, this is a restricted area." Alessia, wrapped in a dark cloak, pleaded anxiously, "I'm sorry, I have an urgent matter. Please let me in." The blonde man stopped in his tracks. "Is that your friend?" Eric's gaze passed through the crowd and landed on Alessia. "What are you doing here?" Alessia's eyes revealed her urgency. She suddenly broke through the barrier and ran toward the figure ahead. "Lord Eric." Eric reached out and caught her, steadying her swaying body. The blonde man in the back opened his mouth wide and let out a gasp. Alessia raised her face, her eyes filled with tears. "Please help me." Eric stood in front of the bookshelf. "You are saying Viscount Owen set the fire. Do you have evidence?" Alessia sat in the armchair. "Although there is no evidence, the timing." That is just too coincidental. Eric crossed his arms over his chest. That is merely your speculation. I cannot convict a Viscount based solely on your side of the story. You are being too hasty. He looked down at her. Did you come alone? Where are your attendants? Alessia looked down at her teacup. I left in a hurry. I only brought a few guards. Eric's eyes turned cold. You will stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning, I will arrange a carriage to take you back. Alessia gripped the teacup in her hands tightly. Then what about the fire? Eric turned his back. I will handle it. Alessia watched his back, then lowered her head, sitting alone in front of the bookshelf. Eric walked out of the room, the blonde man following behind. How terrifying. That girl was only doing her duty, wasn't she? Eric stopped and turned his head, asking in return, "Are you saying I am terrifying?" The blonde man leaned against the wall. "Are you not?" The castle stood tall under the sunlight. Alessia walked forward, surrounded by guards, her cloak sweeping across the stone-paved ground. In the end, all I could do was pass on a message. She followed in Eric's footsteps to leave. The guard asked in confusion, "Grand Duchess, where are you going?" Alessia stopped. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to go and say goodbye to Lord Eric." She stood under a tree, watching Eric not far away. The blonde man leaned close to Alessia's ear, a smile on his lips. "If no one stops him, my husband will coldly protect that suspect. Is that what you were thinking?" Alessia took a sudden step back, widening the distance between them. "Who are you?" The blonde man placed one hand on his chest and bowed. "I'm Eric's adjutant. Just call me Joseph. It is a pleasure to meet you." Grand Duchess. Alessia lowered her head, avoiding his gaze. "I do not doubt him. I'm just worried about the villagers. If Lord Eric could take action." Joseph narrowed his eyes. "If you were Viscount Owen in this situation, now what would you do first?" Alessia lightly rested her chin on her hand. "Attempt to destroy the evidence? For example, killing the arsonist." Joseph snapped his fingers. "Exactly. There are usually two ways to go about it. Silence them by killing them, or send them out of the country's borders. If it were me, I would choose the former. But the Viscount laid off his servants due to his debts. The arsonist, that should still be alive. Last night, Eric ordered the main roads to be blocked. If your speculation is correct, that person must still be within the territory. After hearing this, do you still think Lord Eric is indifferent?" Alessia looked at Eric's back. "Why didn't he? That tell me anything?" Joseph said, "That is probably the bloodline of a Lansimo's family. I have known him for a long time, and I once thought he lacked human emotions." Joseph lowered his eyes. "Are you getting married?" "The ministers hope we choose a princess from the royal family for a political marriage. But with your noble status, she is not even on the candidate list. I don't think you need to accept." Eric's voice was calm. "What if I say this is exactly what I want?" Joseph withdrew from his thoughts, his finger resting on his chin. He stepped forward, approaching Alessia. "Do you want to test that theory?" He slowly reached out his hand. A long sword tore through the air, brushing past Joseph's ear and embedding itself deeply into the tree trunk behind him. Joseph turned his head in shock, cold sweat rolling down his cheek. Eric walked closer in his military boots, shadows covering his body. "You seem very free, Joseph. Since that's the case, want to have a sparring match?" Joseph hurriedly spoke. "Wait, I can explain." Eric's gaze was icy. "I don't want to hear your excuses. Pick up your sword." Joseph pulled out the long sword nailed to the tree. "It seems I really angered him this time, but having a fight isn't bad either." He licked his lips. Since he initiated it, the ministers won't have anything to say. "It's been a long time since I've seen blood." Alessia suddenly rushed between the two, spreading her arms to block the blade. "Stop!" Eric abruptly retracted his sword. He looked down at Alessia. "What are you doing? Why haven't you gone home yet?" Alessia raised her face. "I just want to talk to you." "Lord Eric, please." Joseph stood in the distance, watching Eric being dragged away by Alessia. He is, after all, a henpecked husband. Alessia stopped by the stone wall. "I'm very sorry for causing so much trouble, but I can't just go back like this. I promised the villagers I would give them an explanation. Doing nothing would make me unable to sleep or eat in peace." Eric turned his head. "What do you think you can do?" Alessia clenched her fists. "I don't know, but I can learn. I am not afraid of any difficulties. So please let me help. I know this is selfish, but please don't send me away." Eric looked down at her. "I wasn't going to send you away." Alessia observed his expression. "But you are angry, aren't you?" Eric said, "Because you stood on his side." Alessia froze in place, doubting what she just heard. "I'm sorry." Eric pursed his lips. You seem to be getting along very well with him and even try to protect him. He looked straight into Alessia's eyes. "I am your husband. Do not stand by his side." Alessia froze in place. Is that what he thought? "I wasn't trying to protect that person. I just wanted to get Eric's attention. And besides, is this kind of thing really important right now?" Eric turned his back, his body exuding a chilling aura. "If you insist on staying, then stay. But you're not allowed to go near any dangerous places." If something like this happens again, just punch the guy directly. Alessia nodded repeatedly. I promise I won't run around anymore, Lord Eric. She grabbed Eric's clothes. If I break my promise, I am willing to accept any punishment. Also, the next time you have a dispute with someone, I will stand by your side. Eric gazed at her face. This kind of promise, it feels like a dream. He extended his pinky finger and hooked it around Alessia's fingertip. Pinky swear. Alessia stared at their intertwined fingers. This man is actually so easy to handle. Eric noticed her gaze. What is it? Alessia waved her hands in a panic. Nothing, really nothing. She covered her lips, her heart beating violently in her chest. This is too bad. For a moment just now, I actually thought he was a little cute. Alessia followed behind Eric, walking through the sunlit courtyard. Regarding that fire, how you plan to handle it? Eric stopped. Wait for them to reveal their flaws. We cannot be too hasty. Alessia lowered her eyes. She fell silent. Eric pushed open a wooden door. For now, you will stay in this room. It is not as comfortable as the Lord's estate, and there are fewer servants. You need to be mentally prepared. Alessia walked into the room, looking around at the simple furnishings. Okay, Eric turned around. Then, I'll see you later. Alessia called out to him. Please wait a moment. Eric stopped and looked back over his shoulder. Alessia folded her hands over her chest and raised her face. Would there be anything wrong with us staying together? Alessia covered her burning cheeks. I actually said out loud, the loneliness of being left behind, the mountain of work, and everything that happened that night. There are just too many things I want to ask. I want to stay with you for as long as possible. Alessia bit her fingertip. That sentence just now sounded almost like a proposal. Perhaps I don't need to take it back at all. Eric leaned down, bringing his face close to Alessia's. Say it again. I didn't hear you clearly just now. Alessia was pressed against the wall, her back clinging to the cold stone bricks. Eric said, you should understand what words like that mean. Haven't you learned your lesson from last time? He reached out and clasped the back of Alessia's neck, his thumb rubbing against her skin. If you want to back out now, this is your last chance. Eric let go and straightened his body. It seems I heard wrong. He turned and walked away. Rest for today. Alessia collapsed onto the floor, covering her burning cheeks with both hands, panting heavily. Just now, I almost gave myself completely to him. The carriage wheels rolled over the gravel road. It came to a steady stop among the desolate ruins. A porter hoisted a piece of timber and shouted loudly, Lady Alessia has arrived. The Grand Duke's party. But has arrived too. A guard reached out to hold the carriage door. Please watch your step. Eric placed a hand on the guard's shoulder. I'll handle it. The guard trembled. Igriagajis. An old woman stopped the work in her hands. The Grand Duchess. Why is she here? Alessia asked, why are you all here? I thought you were still at the estate receiving treatment. The old woman said, we appreciate your kindness, but we are more worried about the village. We want to rebuild as soon as possible and return to our old lives. Eric looked around. Even if you rebuild, it might be burned down again. You don't have the money to start over again and again, do you? Moreover, destroying the scene will make it harder to find traces of the arsonist. Alessia froze in place, her eyes wide open. A villager suddenly pushed Alessia aside. What is with that tone? We are the victims here. You nobles just treat us as a source of tax revenue, don't you? Eric lowered his brow. What did you just say? Alessia suddenly lunged at Eric, reaching out to cover his mouth. Don't say another word. You absolutely cannot say such harsh words again. She lowered her eyes. Everyone, I am deeply sorry that this has happened in the territory. No words can soothe. Not your pain. She walked towards the villagers. But our desire to solve the case and rebuild the village is exactly the same as yours. The most urgent task is to reduce casualties and catch the true culprit. Arguing will not improve the situation. Please cooperate with the investigation to uncover the truth. Alessia clenched the collar of her dress. As the Lord and as the protector entrusted to manage the taxes, the Lansimo's family promises to find the culprit behind the arson. The wind blew through the treetops, leaves swirling in the air. Viscount Owen slammed his hand on the desk. The Grand Duke has returned. Shouldn't he be busy with official duties and leave all the territory's affairs to his wife? Peelden stood in front of the desk. I don't know. That's why I said we should avoid such extreme measures. Marcus and his men are trapped near the village. The army has also intervened, and now everything is under the Grand Duke's command. Viscount Owen closed his eyes, pressing his fingertips hard against his temples. If the truth is exposed, the two of us are completely finished. We have no other choice. Eric tilted his head. Did I say something wrong? Alessia clenched her fists, veins popping on her forehead. She wished she could gag him. A rag doll lay in the ashes, its skirt covered in mud. Alessia bent down and picked it up. This is terrible. Eric looked around. Was it the starting point of the fire in the farmland? Why is the damage inside the village also so severe? A villager explained, this year, the army purchased a large number of horses and the price of fodder skyrocketed. Everyone piled their wheat stalks and straw in their homes, intending to save them until winter to sell. Who would have thought that these things would end up becoming the best kindling? Eric looked into the distance. Are there any buildings with lighter damage? A villager pointed ahead. Yes, everyone is currently crowded in the church to rest. Other than the church, people have nowhere else to go. Alessia held the rag doll. Was I wrong? If I hadn't rejected the Viscount's proposal in the first place, would all of this not have happened? Eric looked at Alessia. What do you think? Alessia avoided his gaze. She looked at the wounded lying inside the church. We should prepare a safe place first. There are injured people and children everywhere in the village. At the very least, we must provide them with warm beds. You decide the rest. Eric looked down at the ruins. Relocate the entire village. Alessia suddenly turned around. What did you say? Eric said, clearing these rubble alone will take a month. Lansamos is nearby, and there is enough land there to accommodate everyone. Isn't this the best solution right now? Alessia retorted loudly. Absolutely not. We haven't reached the point where rebuilding is impossible. Making them abandon their homes now is too cruel. Relocation means abandoning the land passed down through generations. All their memories and sense of belonging will disappear. Eric turned his face. Is that more important than survival? Alessia looked at the ruins in the distance. If survival is the only goal, why did they refuse the treatment at the Grand Duke's estate and drag their injured bodies? Not all the way here. Alessia lowered her eyes. It's not just houses and bodies that are injured. People's hearts are also hurt. No matter how severe the impact, physical wounds will eventually heal. But to cure the trauma of the soul, a place of belonging is needed. No matter how much pain they suffer outside, as long as they can return there, it will embrace everything. That is home. That is the reason they cannot abandon this place. Alessia placed a hand on her chest, her tone resolute. I will absolutely not agree to forcing them to abandon their homeland. At the very least, such a decision must obtain the consent of the entire village. She suddenly realized she had lost her composure and shrank her shoulders, stepping back. I'm sorry. I was too emotional and selfishly blurted out such things. A villager nodded. The madam is right. No matter how painful it is inside, we must eventually make a decision. But this pain is like a needle piercing our hearts. Even I don't know what it's really for. If you ask me whether I'm willing to move away, my answer is no. He walked toward Alessia, softly calling her name. Lady Alessia, from now on we entrust everything to you. He leaned close to Alessia's ear and whispered, and I think the Grand Duke said those things just now to motivate you. Because you looked very depressed earlier and hadn't expressed your own opinion. Those words must have cheered you up, right? The Grand Duke's care for you might be much more than you imagine. The villager waved goodbye and then turned to leave. Eric looked at Alessia. You are quite good with words. Alessia suddenly reached out and shoved Eric's shoulder. Is there really no other way to communicate? Just now, I really thought you were serious. You scare me half to death. Eric turned his head. What are you talking about? I genuinely thought that was a good suggestion. Alessia froze in place. Shadows covered her face, and her eyes widened. Do you not have a heart, you man? If things were left for you to handle, it would absolutely turn into a complete mess. From now on, before you make any decisions, you must tell me first. Eric revealed a hint of confusion. Alessia raised her voice. Do you understand? Eric replied softly, understood. Serena, that hid behind the broken walls and ruins, clutching a paper bag in her arms, her gaze locked on Alessia. That woman is actually really here. Alessia pinched the tip of a needle, a drop of blood seeping from her fingertip. Failed again. At this rate, I won't be able to finish before dawn. Everyone has high hopes for me, yet I can't even do such a small thing. Not properly. Serena pushed open the heavy wooden door. What are you doing here? Alessia abruptly turned her head. Serena? Serena walked in step by step. Alessia stood up. Why are you here? Serena let out a cold laugh. Is it strange that I return to my own hometown? I really should thank you. If you hadn't fired me, I wouldn't have been able to protect my little bit of property when the fire broke out. Alessia lowered her gaze, avoiding the other woman's eyes. You brought that upon yourself. I have nothing to say to you. Serena took a step closer. Really nothing to say? You had a part in that fire too, didn't you? Alessia froze in place, her pupils trembling violently. Serena clenched her skirt tightly. Just as I expected, she suddenly swung her arm grabbing a basket and smashing it forward. "Get out. There is no place for you here, you cursed woman." A villager grabbed Serena's arm, questioning loudly, "What did you do to the Grand Duchess?" Serena revealed a cold smile. "You came at just the right time." She grabbed Alessia's wrist and forcefully dragged her outside. "Come with me." The howling wind swept up fallen leaves. Serena pushed Alessia to the ground. Facing the gathered villagers, she opened her arms and shouted, "Listen up, everyone." The villagers stopped their work and gathered around. Serena pointed at Alessia on the ground. "You've all been deceived. This woman is a princess of Ilisha, a spy sent by the enemy. She's also involved in that fire, and because of her, I lost my job." Serena continued to incite the crowd. She planned to get rid of all of us from the very beginning. How many people in this village lost their loved ones in the war? And how many lost everything they had in the fire? How do you still have a nerve to come back here? Alessia, slumped in the mud, looked up at Serena. "I have never hidden my origins." Serena interrupted her. "Are you trying to say you're not an Ilishan? Or are you going to claim the fire had nothing to do with you? Stop joking. Isn't all of this the truth?" The sound of galloping hooves approached from a distance. A knight halted in the rain. He looked down at the chaotic scene. "What's all this commotion about?" Serena continued cursing, while the villagers formed an impenetrable wall around them. Eric galloped forward, his horse's hooves splashing through the puddles as it let out a loud neigh. Serena grabbed Alessia by the collar. "How much more pain are you going to bring us? You demon." Villagers pulled from behind, desperately trying to stop the violence. Eric dismounted and rushed into the chaotic crowd. He pulled Alessia into his arms. Alessia leaned against Eric's chest, her fingers tightly gripping his lapels, her body trembling uncontrollably. Rain washed over the dead branches, and birds flew across the pale gray sky. Villagers gathered in small groups, whispering rumors among themselves. Standing before the wardrobe, he said, "Go take a bath and change your clothes first. We'll talk about the rest later." He placed the clothes on a wooden rack. "Go quickly before the water gets cold." Alessia replied softly, "All right." She stepped barefoot into the warm water. Moonlight streamed through the high window, casting shadows on the floor. Alessia closed her eyes. "What did I do wrong? I was just playing the role of a competent wife. I was just completing the tasks assigned to me, handling the piles of paperwork. I just wanted to be praised, longing for recognition. Is it because my motives were impure that I must be punished? I can never escape the destiny carved into my flesh." Countless dark shadows reached out their arms, trying to drag Alessia into the abyss. All the efforts she made to fit in here were completely meaningless. Alessia curled up in the water, her body slowly sinking. Eric burst through the door. He pulled Alessia's soaked body out of the water. "What are you doing? Spit the water out." Alessia's face was as pale as paper. Eric tightly gripped her shoulders. "This is bad. She can't hear my voice at all." Eric pinched Alessia's jaw, forcefully prying her mouth open. Alessia coughed violently, spitting out mouthfuls of water. Her body convulsed in Eric's arms. Eric pressed her back, feeling the faint rise and fall of her breathing. "Wake up. Don't throw your life away over something like that." Alessia lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." Eric let go and turned his head away, avoiding her gaze. "Put your clothes on first." He turned his back, standing in the shadows. "Why didn't you tell me? Her harassment started when you were at the estate, didn't it? Why didn't you ask me for help? Do you not trust me?" Alessia lowered her head and gripped her collar. "If I had asked for help back then, would none of this have really happened? If that's true, please help me." Eric Ransomos. Eric turned around abruptly, his pupils contracting in the dark. The wall lamp flickered, casting swaying shadows on the stone bricks. Alessia wrapped her arms around Eric's shoulders and kissed his lips. Eric caressed Alessia's cheek. "Is this what you mean by help me?" Alessia closed her eyes. "I can't tell the difference, whether it's physical torment or verbal abuse. I've long grown used to enduring malice. No one allowed me to die, even as my soul was eaten away. What I truly fear is showing someone my most fragile and ugly self." Her mother looked down at Alessia, her red eyes cold. "So what?" And then, facing Eric, she thought, "I can't say it. I'm not allowed to speak. What if I'm rejected again?" Alessia's body trembled slightly. "Just hold me tightly." Eric lowered his head, letting out a brief murmur of question. Alessia pushed him down onto the bed. Eric froze in place, his purple eyes widening slightly. Alessia lifted her face, her messy long hair falling over her shoulders. "If you're not in the mood right now, then just pretend I'm someone else. You can kiss me, or embrace me with your fingertips, even if this is just empty and loveless pleasure. I don't need revenge, nor do I need a prince from a fairy tale. A feather that drifted down in the air. Alessia reached out her palm, her fingertips touching nothingness. Eric leaned over and hugged Alessia tightly, burying his face in the crook of her neck. I'm sorry. I thought you'd have an easier time if I wasn't around. He tightened his arms. I didn't expect it would put you in an even worse situation. All of this happened right within my reach. I know I have no right. Thought to ask for your forgiveness. Never say those words again, and never show that expression again. Alessia listened carefully. Those words were so clear, stirring up an inexplicable illusion in the depths of her heart. Eric cupped her cheek, his thumb rubbing against her skin. Alessia turned her head, feeling the warmth of his palm. What I long for isn't revenge, nor a prince from a fairy tale. I just want to be embraced. Eric gazed at Alessia, his purple eyes, trembling slightly. Alessia shut her eyes tightly as tears rolled down her cheeks. This is all I need. Eric leaned forward, wrapping his arms around Alessia's shoulders, burying her completely in his embrace. Eric knocked on the wooden door, producing a dull echo. Alessia looked up toward the door. Eric pushed the door open and entered, holding a white cup. It's me. Have you calmed down? Alessia sat in a chair. I'm sorry for making you worry. I lost control of my emotions earlier and crossed the line. Eric placed the cup on the table. Don't worry about that. He cleared his throat, avoiding Alessia's gaze. Iva investigated Sirina. 3 years ago, her husband and child both died on the battlefield. Alessia raised her hand, covering her forehead. Is that why she treated me like that? It all began on the first day she stepped into the Grand Duke's estate. Alessia stood in the center of the Grand Hall. The maids stood on both sides, heads bowed in silence. They couldn't accept a foreign mistress. Serena stood among the maids, tearing the white fabric in her hands to shreds. Alessia covered her face. That kind of hatred was entirely different. No matter how I tried to avoid her, she never stopped humiliating me. Is it my fault? Because of my father's sins, she lost her husband. Then I took away her position. I failed to fulfill my duties as the Grand Duchess. Yet I occupy this position as if it's my right. I only wanted to change the situation. I never intended to hurt her. Eric reached out, his fingertips gently touching Alessia's cheek, wiping away that bloody scratch. You are not just the Grand Duchess. If you must bear the sins of your father, then, as your husband, I should rightfully share that weight with you. Alessia looked up sharply, her golden eyes trembling. Lord Eric, this has nothing to do with you. Eric extended his index finger, pressing it against her lips to stop her unfinished words. You don't need to care about how others look at you, and you certainly don't need to bear the sins of others. Alessia froze. Eric continued, I cannot change your origins, but if you intend to carry this heavy burden for the rest of your life. He stood in the interplay of light and shadow, extending his broad hand toward Alessia. Then let me bear it with you. Most importantly, you are my wife. Alessia leaned against Eric's chest and closed her eyes, wrapping her arms around his waist and hugging him tightly in return. Sunlight pierced through the dead branches, shining on the shattered bricks and tiles. In the ruins, wooden beams were scattered across the ground with broken supports. Slanting into the dirt. Black leather boots stepped across the grass as Alessia slowly approached. Whispers could be heard. She's here again. If it were me, I'd never step outside again after what happened. Alessia stopped in front of the ruins. It's not lunchtime yet, is it? It's been raining for days, and the construction progress has already fallen behind. She looked around at the broken walls and debris. At this rate, we won't even finish clearing the rubble in 3 days. A laborer stood up abruptly. Are you saying we're slacking off? We work from dawn till dusk until our arms are about to break. We can't even get a decent meal. Alessia lowered her eyes, silently listening to the commotion behind her. The laborer took a step forward. Do you think coming here gives you the right to boss us around? You have no idea what it's like to work hard for a whole day. Alessia spoke slowly, and then the laborers froze, looking at each other in bewilderment. Alessia turned around, looking straight at the gathering crowd. So what? You're hungry and your arms ache? How interesting. From what I see, all of you are quite healthy. Without clean shelters and water sources, if people are exposed to this environment for too long, they will get sick sooner or later. She pointed to the ruined street behind her. That will make the situation even worse for those receiving treatment. If we're still at this pace before winter sets in, people will die. If we're short on hands, stop doing chores and reduce hunting trips. Alessia waved her arm. Everyone, regardless of gender or age, must do everything they can. The laborer's face flushed red as he roared loudly. Why should we listen to your orders? Alessia called out to the soldiers who were working. Everyone, stop what you're doing. She looked down at the laborers. If you refuse to obey orders, you're free to leave with the army. If you can't stand taking orders from a lowly Ilishan, then rebuild everything on your own. Behind Alessia, the soldiers stood in formation. She stood at the very front of the crowd, her green eyes staring at the idle laborers. Suit yourselves. Sunlight pierced through the dead branches, shining on the shattered bricks and tiles. Laborers and soldiers that work together. Alessia sat to the side. It's too quiet. She lowered her eyes, using power to force others into submission. Such a thing was unimaginable in the past. Yet now, no one dares to point fingers at my origins. The laborer carried a heavy wooden board and walked past Alessia without uttering a single complaint. Just as Eric said, there's no need to seek anyone's approval. Maintaining distance might win more respect. Serena, that was curled up in the corner of the storage room, her long red hair scattered over her knees. Sunlight fell from a narrow window high above. Two villagers stepped forward. Lady Alessia, you look busy, but regarding Serena's matter, I didn't want to make a decision on my own. Currently, she is locked in the garden shed. How should we handle this? Alessia sat on a wooden chair, looking down as she adjusted her purple skirt. Her voice had no inflection. What are the rules? The villager answered truthfully. If she laid a hand on you, by law, she should receive 30 lashes and be exiled. He suddenly dropped to his knees. I beg you. Serena wasn't like this before. Although she had a quick temper, she was always diligent in her work. Serena stood in the sunlight, resting her hand on her pregnant belly, leaning against her husband's broad shoulders, smiling and greeting the neighbors. Ever since she lost her husband and son, everything changed. The villager bowed his head, resting against Alessia's knees, his body trembling uncontrollably. Could you please forgive her this once? Being tormented for 3 whole years, saying there's absolutely no resentment would be a lie. But even then, she still strictly performed her duties as a maid. Someone who has served in the estate for many years should know the consequences of laying a hand on me, not to mention doing it right in front of Lord Eric. Was that outburst really just a moment of anger? Alessia stood up. I don't plan to make a decision right now. I just want to talk to her first. Serena knelt on the cold floor, her hands tied behind her back with a rope. Her long red hair covered half of her face. She bit her lower lip tightly and looked up, staring dead ahead. Alessia sat on a higher seat. This is my first time looking down at her from this angle. The sense of inferiority I used to feel vanished in this moment. In the past, I didn't even dare to look her in the eyes. I could only lower my head to avoid her contempt. I'm not a demon, nor am I a judge, but with just one word, I can decide her life or death. This is power, a weapon inherited from my husband. Alessia lowered her eyes, her long pink hair covering half of her face. Is this why Mother was so desperately obsessed with status? She issued an order. Untie her ropes. The villager froze, but Alessia's tone was firm. Do as I say. The villager tremblingly reached out and untied the thick rope around Serena's wrists. Serena was helped to her feet. Why are you doing this? Do you think playing the saint will make me weep with gratitude? Alessia watched her. I only want to know one thing. When you publicly threw dirty water on me, was that out of your personal resentment, or were you ordered by someone? Serena violently broke free from the villager's support. I have no obligation to answer you. The Grand Duke isn't here today anyway. Perhaps he's busy chasing after another crying woman. She suddenly reached out her hand. The Ransomos family has indeed fallen. Alessia spoke coldly. Shut your mouth while you still can. Serena froze in place, her red pupils contracting in shock. Alessia's voice was low and steady. There are guards at the door. If you dare to make a scene, they will rush in within seconds, and you might not survive. And that poor woman standing next to you, she risked being punished alongside you just to plead on your behalf. If anything happens to me, she won't be able to escape unscathed either. Alessia lowered her eyes. I don't care how you see me, so I don't care at all about what you say. She straightened her posture, her golden eyes burning with anger. But I absolutely will not allow anyone to slander my husband. Watch your words. She stood up. I will ask you one last time. Did you really plan all of this alone? Serena's eyes widened sharply, her red pupils trembling violently in the shadows. Cold sweat rolled down her forehead. She stood in a dark corridor. In front of her stood 2 men wearing cloaks. Serena rebuked loudly. You're the one being manipulated. You're a spy from Ilisha. Stop lying. I will never let you get away with this. The guard stood aside. The air instantly froze. Alessia took a step forward. A spy from Ilisha? So that's what you thought. All those violent and vicious words, the maids isolating me. Was all of that because of your so-called sense of justice? When the nobles from Ilisha came to the estate on business, you didn't show this kind of attitude, did you? Serena slumped to the ground. Alessia stared at her. Why did it have to be me? She pressed her hand against her chest, her long pink hair swaying in the light and shadow. Since you can't answer, I'll answer for you. You didn't challenge those corrupt nobles. Instead, you chose to bully me. The reason? That is simple. Because I was the weakest one. I was right within your reach, stranded in a foreign land, unable to even tell left from right. Alessia looked down at Serena. Why did you choose to join forces with them? You clearly knew the harm they caused to your homeland. I can't understand. Did you really betray your own people and side with the enemy just to get revenge on me? Serena suddenly looked up, her red pupils dilated with anger. She shouted back at Alessia, "Stop talking nonsense. I never sided with them." The strange man stood in front of Serena, looking down at her. Then do as I say. If you can help us leave this place, I will relay all your demands to the Viscount. What do you think? Serena gritted her teeth and slapped the strange man across the face. Go to hell. You murderers. You arsonists. How dare you show your faces here? She roared, her red pupils dilating and bloodshot. I'm going to report you to the Grand Duke right now. You fools walked right into a trap. The strange man kicked Serena in the stomach. What's the use of reporting to the Grand Duke? Do you think he would offend the Viscount just for you? Even if caught, the nobles will be let off lightly. Sooner or later, we will come back to take revenge on you and your allies. He reached out and grabbed Serena's hair, forcing her to look up. Follow my instructions, and at least the village's future will be safe. You don't even need to think about who to choose. Is it the woman you hate, or your hometown and the villagers? Serena sat on the wooden chair with her head bowed, her hands tightly clasped. There are explosives buried on the hillside behind the village. If you couldn't bear the pain and wanted to return to the Grand Duke's estate, someone would have to escort you. They were going to use that opening to escape. But if you didn't go back, Serena suddenly looked up, her pupils contracting in shock. The wooden door was pushed open heavily. Alessia hurriedly ran out. The laborers let out a cry of surprise. Lady Alessia. Alessia ran through the forest, her long dress swaying. God, please. No one has ever saved me before. She suddenly tripped and fell, her body hitting the ground hard. In this long life, just this once, she pushed herself up. Please, you must protect him. Lord Eric Ransomos. The strange man pushed aside the dense bushes, his fingertips brushing past the rough leaves. He held his breath, observing the area ahead. The soles of his boots slipped on the mud. The strange man gripped his rifle horizontally with both hands, his knuckles turning white from the force. He gritted his teeth. Damn it, a bullet was fired. The horse fell abruptly, kicking up a large cloud of dust. The fallen soldier shouted, I'm fine. Don't let him get away. The strange man held his rifle horizontally, backing away step by step on the grassy slope. 3 soldiers leveled their spears, closing in from 3 directions. The strange man kept his finger on the trigger, his knuckles trembling violently. Don't come any closer, or I'll... Eric appeared in an instant, grabbing the man by the back of his neck. His purple eyes radiated a chilling intent. The rifle slipped from the man's hands and dropped, landing heavily on the grass and kicking up fine dust. Eric knelt on one knee, his right hand firmly pressing the back of the man's head, burying his face into the mud. Don't move if you don't want to die. The soldiers charged up the slope with their spears. My lord, are you all right? Eric picked up the rifle. He's alone, but don't let your guard down. He might still be hiding weapons. That shot missed just now, but the next one might not. The strange man had a spear pressed against his throat. I didn't do anything. I just came here to hunt, that's all. A soldier stepped forward. Don't be stupid. For the past 3 days, the soldiers that have guarded every road. The strange man lifted his head. How would I know? I was just chasing a deer and suddenly ended up here. You have to believe me. A soldier stared at the gravel on the ground. The terrain here is indeed complex. It wouldn't be surprising if there was a small path we missed. Eric walked slowly over to the man. Where did you get this gun? The strange man froze. I'm a hunter. Of course I have a gun. Eric looked down at the rifle. Guns used by hunters are mostly old and prone to misfiring. They're usually only used against large beasts. However, this gun is different. The strange man's pupils suddenly contracted. Cold sweat rolled down his cheeks, and his breathing stopped for a moment. Eric's voice was ice cold. Ordinary people can't get their hands on such a precise gun. I'll ask you one last time. He aimed the muzzle right at the center of the strange man's forehead. Where are your accomplices? The strange man lowered his head, his body curling into a ball on the grass. I'll take you to the hideout. Please spare my life. He suddenly looked up, the corners of his mouth twisting into a smirk, a vicious glint in his eyes. But before that, Eric sensed something wrong, his purple pupils contracting sharply. Alessia stood at the edge of the forest. "Please let me through." Two guards crossed their arms, blocking her path. "Until we catch the arsonist, no one is allowed to enter the forest alone." Alessia took a step forward. "Eric is in danger. If you won't go, then I'll go by myself." The guards spread their hands. "The Grand Duke will never lose to a few thugs. Besides, now where did you hear this news from?" A muffled explosion echoed from the distance. Alessia suddenly turned around, her golden pupils contracting sharply. The guards also looked toward the depths of the forest in shock. Alessia murmured softly, "That sound. Could it be?" She lifted her skirt and rushed toward the dense forest. "Eric!" The guards shouted loudly from behind. "Lady Alessia, it's very dangerous over there. Please return to the village." Alessia headed straight into the depths of the forest. She suddenly stopped, her green pupils contracting sharply as her gaze locked onto what lay ahead. A massive fissure had appeared at the edge of the cliff. The dirt was crumbling into the abyss. A brown horse lay dead in a pool of blood, its limbs stiff, sprawled near the edge. Alessia stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the abyss, not at the rising black smoke. She raised her hand to cover her mouth and nose, her golden eyes trembling violently. A guard leaned down to inspect the fallen horse. "Is this the Grand Duke's horse?" "Impossible." Another guard suddenly shouted. "Send men down the cliff immediately to search for the Grand Duke." Shouts echoed through the valley. "Eric!" A guard rushed forward and grabbed her arm. "Lady Alessia, don't get any closer. The ground could collapse at any moment." Alessia struggled, trying to shake off his grip. "Lord Eric, that is still down there. I once resisted and I once fled. For 3 whole years, I closed my heart off, living with him like strangers. Only now have we finally faced each other. I was finally able to tell him all the pain I've been carrying. Have I been hoping for something all this time? Hoping for that faint light shining through the cracks. Will this place ever become somewhere I can call home?" Alessia made up her mind. "I must find him." A metal gun barrel protruded from the bushes. The guard's eyes widened sharply as he noticed the movement in the grass. Alessia was tackled to the ground by the guard. Dead branches snapped beneath them. A bullet grazed past their heads and shattered the tree trunk above. The guard helped her onto a horse. "Run quickly, Lady Alessia." Alessia gripped the reins tightly, looking down at the guard on the ground. "What about you?" The guard slapped the horse's rump and turned to look into the depths of the dense forest. "Reinforcements will be here soon. I'm sorry, I cannot accompany you." A bullet struck the dirt near the horse's hooves. The guard that let out a final roar. "Go quickly." Alessia pulled tightly on the reins, charging into the dark shadows of the trees. Thunder tore through the clouds, and lightning cracked over the dense forest. Rain washed over the muddy ground. The guard raised his sword, pointing it forward. "Are you insane? You are betraying your country." The strange man raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger. "I know exactly what I am doing." Sweat seeped from the guard's forehead, his gaze sweeping past the gun muzzle. "The Grand Duke and the Grand Duchess. Please let them reunite safely." Alessia leaned low over the horse's back, her hands tightly gripping its neck. "What should I do? I don't even know how to ride a horse. Eric wanted to teach me once, but I was too afraid to get close to him back then. I wasted 3 years for nothing." The rain poured heavier, and the sky turned completely dark. Alessia rode deep into the dense forest. "What exactly am I hoping for? He's still alive, right? He's not hurt, right?" The horse's hooves splashed muddy water. Will this weather make things worse? I used to count the days, longing for this contract marriage to end sooner. But now, all I can do is pray for his safety. Alessia tightened her grip on the reins. "Now is not the time to think about this. If I don't survive, I will never be able to save my husband. Calm down, just like this. Keep this pace." The horse's hooves stepped into thin air. Crushed stones rolled down into the abyss. Eric's voice rang out. "Pull your leg out quickly. You'll be dragged down along with the horse." He leaped up and caught the falling figure. Alessia suddenly opened her eyes wide. This was the first time in my life that my prayers were answered by God. Rain washed over the edge of the cave. Moonlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating the firelight deep inside the cave. Alessia opened her eyes. Lord Eric. Eric, bare-chested with white bandages wrapped around his abdomen, sat by the fire, sorting his clothes. Alessia propped herself up, her long hair slipping over her shoulders. "Is this a dream?" Eric turned his head, his purple pupils reflecting the firelight. "You're awake. Are you hurt anywhere?" Alessia reached out and touched his cheek. Her fingertips felt his warm skin. "This is not a dream. She suddenly threw herself into Eric's arms, her hands tightly wrapping around his neck. Eric froze in place, letting her lean against his chest. The fire crackled. A long sword was planted diagonally in the dirt. The two embraced tightly in the firelight. Alessia buried her face in his broad shoulders. This is not a dream. He's still alive. He's still by my side. Alessia let go and looked around at the pitch-black rock walls. Where's this? Eric said. The rain was too heavy. I found a place to rest temporarily. You fainted just now from excessive shock. Alessia looked out at the endless dark night outside the cave. Where are your guards? What are they doing? Eric stared at the fire, the flames dancing in his purple eyes. A few days ago, my subordinates intercepted a carrier pigeon. We couldn't trace its source, but they have clearly been driven into a corner. No wonder they lost patience and resorted to force during the standoff. I just didn't expect them to have explosives. Insisting on promoting the herb trade might have just been a cover for weapons smuggling. After the proposal was rejected, he couldn't answer to his sponsor, so he had no choice but to set fire to the fields and erase all escape routes. The confiscated firearms have been sent to Joseph. If the manufacturer is found to be from another country, the royal family will swiftly intervene. Alessia looked anxious. If that's the case, won't the soldiers in the village be in danger? Eric pressed her shoulders. You don't need to worry. The men who stayed there are all ones who grew up with me. I know their strength better than anyone. Even if they are at a disadvantage in weapons, they won't lose to those vulgar thugs. Besides, that our current location is unknown. Eric raised his hand, his fingertips running through Alessia's long hair. Going out blindly will only get us killed for nothing. The most important thing right now is to ensure your safety. Alessia shrank her shoulders as her stomach let out a long rumble. Eric asked, do you want something to eat? Two fish were skewered on sticks over the fire, their skin oozing oil as they roasted above the flames. Alessia took the grilled fish and took a bite. It's so delicious. To think Lord Eric can actually cook. Eric held his longsword. This is an essential skill when marching. The boys of the Lanthimos family have to learn it from a young age. Alessia lowered her eyes. To think nobles would learn to cook at home. After we got married, that I've never met his family. On the day of the wedding, they only came to greet me once. But I was so nervous at the time that I didn't even dare to look up. Eric stopped his movements, his purple eyes shifting slightly. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? Alessia frantically waved her arms. Not at all. Thank you for the meal. She chewed heartily, trying to suppress her wildly beating heart. What is wrong with me? Maybe it's just because he is safe and sound that I feel relieved. Since just now, strange thoughts that have been occupying my mind. Alessia covered her lips. Until the rain stops, do we have to stay like this? Dot together? Alessia stared at the blood-seeping bandages. You're bleeding. Are you hurt? Eric replied, it's just a scratch from some branches when I fell down the cliff. I probably didn't bandage it right. I've never been good at handling these things. Alessia leaned in closer, her forehead resting against his broad chest. I can't just leave it like this. Let me help you. Eric asked, do you know how to treat wounds? Alessia unwrapped the rough strips of cloth. When I was a child, I always treated my own wounds. When I lived in Ilisha, my older sisters once kicked me down a cliff. I don't even remember what I did wrong at the time. Actually, I didn't do anything at all. My very existence seemed to make the people around me feel displeased. Eric looked down at the top of her head. She's actually bringing up her past on her own. Alessia continued reminiscing. Fortunately, I only sprained my ankle at the time, and my life wasn't in danger. It was raining that day, just like today. I stayed alone in a pitch-black cave, watching the rain fall and stop, surviving on nuts and rainwater. After 2 whole days passed, I finally realized the cruel reality. In that place called Ilisha, no one would ever come looking for me. Eric gripped her shoulders. And then? What happened? How did you survive? Alessia suddenly looked up, her green eyes meeting his gaze. Their breathing paused in the quiet closeness. Alessia lowered her eyes. I dragged my injured leg and crawled back to that so-called home all by myself. She leaned against Eric's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. So, Lord Eric, I'm truly glad that you're safe and sound. I don't want to lie to myself anymore. According to the contract with him, as long as I play the role of his wife for 3 years, I can return to Ilisha. But I have no home there at all. The place I want to return to is by your side. Alessia looked up. All right, the wound is bandaged. You can put your clothes back on. She looked down at her neckline and pressed her hands against the fabric over her chest. I suddenly remembered something. Did you change my clothes for me? She stared at Eric's back as the air fell into a dead silence. Eric pressed his fist against his mouth and nose, turning his face away to avoid her gaze. Yes, he explained in a low voice, the tips of his ears turning red. In this weather, I was worried you would catch a cold. I'm sorry, but I swear I had my eyes closed the whole time. I didn't see anything. Alessia leaned in front of him, tilting her head to look at his flushed face. What are you talking about? It's not like we haven't crossed that line before. Eric closed his eyes to hide his embarrassment. Alessia covered her lips and giggled. She leaned on Eric's shoulder. The weather is cold, so let's just lean on each other like this. The fire crackled with the sound of splitting wood. The firelight flickered on the stone walls of the cave. Outside, the night was deep. Alessia curled up in his arms. Lord Eric, your body temperature seems to be getting higher and higher. Eric didn't answer. He merely tightened his arms, locking her entirely in his embrace. Alessia looked up in confusion. Eric lowered his head, his face flushing red as he avoided her gaze. Alessia burst into a fit of laughter. I'm sorry, I really didn't mean it. Eric leaned over and pressed her down, his hands planted on either side of her body. You were making fun of me just now, weren't you? Alessia shrank her shoulders to dodge, laughing so hard tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. It tickles. Spare me. Eric lowered his eyes. Don't ever say that about me again, understand? Alessia stopped laughing. I understand, Your Grace. Eric paused his movements. What did you just call me? Alessia blinked her green eyes and tilted her head to look at his profile. Your Grace, is it wrong to call you that? She cradled Eric's face, her fingertips sinking into his messy black hair. We are husband and wife, after all. Eric's eyes wavered in the dim light. What are you planning to do? Alessia brushed aside the loose hair on her cheek and gazed into his eyes. I can't just leave you alone like this. You're injured, and you can't move right now. She washed her hands by the pool. It's getting late. Let's get some rest. Eric sat in the shadows, watching Alessia's back without saying a word. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Alessia's arm, pulling her into his arms. Alessia's back pressed tightly against Eric's chest, with the fire burning beside them. Eric turned his head, his nose pressing against Alessia's cheek. Did you think it would end just like that, my wife? Alessia shrank her shoulders. Wait a minute. Stop for a second. Eric, please calm down. Oh no, he's completely lost control. She looked into Eric's eyes. This kind of anger was completely different from before. Did I go too far? Eric leaned in close to her face, his purple eyes locking onto his prey. He was taking back control. Alessia lay flat on the ground, her hair spread out across the floor. If I can't calm him down, I'm going to lose my life right here. She reached out and pressed against Eric's chest. Wait a minute. Are you planning to go all the way? Absolutely not. Eric lowered his eyelids. Why not? We are husband and wife, aren't we? Alessia was stunned. He was using her own words against her. If this continues, letting reason crumble in the heat, both my sanity and myself will be devoured by this man. She suddenly pushed him away. Eric, no. You're injured. You need to stay still. What if you move too much and your wound tears open? Eric looked down at his abdomen. This kind of minor injury is nothing. He violently ripped off the bandages around his waist. The bandages snapped in the air, revealing his firm muscles. Alessia's eyes widened. She crossed her hands over her chest, staring blankly at the man in front of her. Eric propped himself up with one hand on the ground, his body covering Alessia's. If the wound tears open, I'll just stitch it back up. Alessia lay flat on her back. This isn't what I wanted. I clearly tried so hard to refuse. Tears seeped from the corners of her eyes. Liar. I can't feel the fire. I can't hear the rain. And I can't even sense the passage of time. I'm about to forget who I am. Eric stopped his movements. This isn't the estate. There are no contraceptives here. Maybe we should stop here. Alessia grabbed his wrist. It's okay. I don't mind getting pregnant, as long as it's your child. Eric asked, do you understand what this means? If we have a child, we must take on the responsibilities of parents and give them the best of everything in this world. Failure is absolutely not allowed. The 3-year contract will be voided. I will never allow the mother of my child to leave me. Alessia turned her face slightly, gazing at Eric's profile. I originally just wanted to make a joke. I never thought that far ahead. Eric tightened his arms. You will be Duchess Lanthimos for the rest of your life. Are you sure you want to do this? Alessia leaned on Eric's shoulder and closed her eyes. Yes. The next day, Eric got up and walked toward the horse. The ground is still very wet. We need to hurry back before things get worse. Alessia wrapped the white cloak tightly around herself. It hurts. My back, my legs, my arms. My whole body aches. Eric stood to the side expressionlessly. Alessia widened her eyes. Why? How can you say such serious things with such a plain face? I was struggling in pain all night. Seeing me so uncomfortable, don't you feel the least bit guilty? Eric raised a hand to his jaw, looking away. That's not entirely my fault, right? Alessia suddenly raised her voice. Why would you say that? Eric leaned down. Who made the first move? Alessia choked on her words, avoiding his gaze. Even so, you should have restrained yourself a bit. Right now, that I can't even ride a horse. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes, her hands tightly gripping the edge of the cloak. Eric lowered his head. I'm sorry. Alessia, wrapped in a white cloak, curled up into a ball. She covered her mouth and laughed out loud, tears hanging from the corners of her eyes. Eric stared straight ahead, his expression cold and aloof. Thus, their first argument after marriage came to an end. Eric mounted the horse, lifting Alessia to sit sideways in front of him, and rode through the lush greenery. The villagers stopped what they were doing and looked into the distance. Look, it's the Grand Duke and the Duchess. Thank goodness. You are safe and sound. The criminals have been caught and are being interrogated. The village chief is waiting to meet you too. Eric nodded slightly. Understood. The women crossed their hands over their chests. Thank goodness, we are saved. Alessia stood behind the crowd, watching the noisy scene ahead. Is that Noble the one? Joseph leaned against the window, the corners of his mouth turning up. You're back. Alessia hid behind Eric, covering her mouth. Why has everyone suddenly become so formal? Eric lowered his eyelids. Strictly speaking, he is the emperor of this country. Alessia froze in place. Her pupils trembled. He's actually the emperor.